Have you ever really stopped to think about the invisible systems that power your day? You flip a light switch, you pull out your phone, you turn on a tap. All of it relies on this huge hidden network. So today, let's pull back the curtain and take a look at how a nation actually protects the very foundation of our modern lives. Just look at this. It's way more than just a few power lines and roads. What you're seeing is a deeply complex, interconnected web. It's energy, communications, transportation, finance, you name it. And every single part depends on the others in this incredibly delicate dance that, well, keeps our world from grinding to a halt. And yeah, that's the real kicker, isn't it? In a system that's so tightly woven together, one single failure, one broken link can set off a chain reaction, creating problems that spiral way beyond where they started. So the big question is, how do we stop that from happening? Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about that invisible foundation you rely on every day. Then we'll get a clear definition of what critical infrastructure actually is. After that, we'll look at the modern threats it's up against, figure out how experts assess the real-world impact of a failure, and finally, we'll walk through the four-step plan designed to protect all of it. All right, first up, let's make this personal, because this isn't some far-off, abstract government idea. We're talking about the systems you use from the second you wake up in the morning. Just picture it for a second. Your alarm clock doesn't go off. Power's out. You try to check the news on your phone, but the internet is dead. You need cash, but the ATMs are all offline. You get in your car to drive to work, and every single traffic light is dark. This isn't a movie plot. This is what it looks like when these systems fail. It's like the entire nervous system of our society just goes quiet. So, let's put an official name to this invisible backbone of society. What exactly are we talking about when we use the term critical infrastructure? Okay, now really pay attention to the wording here. It's not just about convenience. The definition specifically says it supports a nation's economic or social well-being and its defense and security. I mean, the stakes really could not be any higher. And this really shows you just how broad this is. We're talking about the big ones, like the energy grid and our communication networks. But it's also water systems, transportation, all our financial services, even healthcare and the supply chain that gets food to your grocery store. It's pretty much everything. So, now that we know what we're protecting, we've got to understand what we're protecting it from. And today, the threats themselves are more complex and interconnected than they've ever been before. To deal with all that complexity, experts use something called an all-hazards approach. It's pretty much what it sounds like. It means you don't just focus on one type of threat, like, say, a cyber attack. You have to look at the full spectrum of everything that could possibly go wrong, from things people do to natural disasters, and even how those threats can overlap and combine. First, you've got your human-induced threats, and this is the stuff you see in the headlines. We're talking about sophisticated ransomware attacks that can shut down an entire hospital system, espionage that's constantly probing for weaknesses in our power grid, or even the risk of someone on the inside, a malicious insider who decides to cause damage. Then, of course, you have natural hazards, and these seem to be getting more frequent and a lot more intense. This covers everything from severe storms and floods to massive events like a global pandemic. It even includes things you might not think about, like space weather, solar flares that can mess with our satellites. And finally, there's the big picture. What's happening on the global stage? A conflict happening halfway around the world can suddenly disrupt the supply chain for a critical computer chip. A political dispute can lead to sanctions, cutting off access to technology we rely on. Our local infrastructure is absolutely not immune to what's happening globally. And this right here, this is the whole reason this is so tricky. It's all about what they call cascading effects. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like dominoes. A flood knocks out one power substation. Okay, bad. But then that power outage takes down a local communications network, which then disrupts the banking systems for an entire region. The impact doesn't just add up, it multiplies. So this threat of a total cascade failure is exactly why you can't protect everything equally. It's just not possible. With all these threats and all these connections, where do you even start to build a defense? Well, the first step is to methodically assess the risk and figure out what truly matters most. And they do this with a pretty logical three-step process. First, you define the function. What essential thing does this asset actually do? Second, you find the critical sites. Where are the physical locations that absolutely have to be protected for it to work? And third, you identify the critical components. The specific nuts and bolts without which the whole thing just grinds to a halt.
But, knowing what's critical is really only half the job. The next logical question is a big one. So what? What are the actual real-world consequences if one of those critical parts or locations goes down?
And the analysis gets super specific, focusing on these 4 key areas. First up, availability. This is the obvious one. Is the service even running? A blackout means power isn't available. Simple. Second is integrity. Is the data it's using accurate? Imagine a cyber attack that doesn't shut down a bank, but just starts changing account balances. The system is on, but it's doing the wrong thing. Third, there's reliability. Can you actually trust the output? Think about a GPS system that starts giving you coordinates that are just a little bit off. It's available, the data seems fine, but it's dangerously unreliable. And last, confidentiality. Is sensitive information being kept secure? This is all about protecting things like military secrets or your personal medical records. Answering these 4 questions gives you the full picture of the potential damage.
Okay, we've identified the assets, we've assessed the risks. Now, let's get into the heart of the solution, the proactive plan to actually reduce these dangers and build up what's called national resilience.
It really boils down to this 4-part cycle. First, you identify all the possible risks, using that all-hazards approach we talked about. Second, you know your drivers. What's motivating your decisions? Why are you protecting one thing over another? Third, you have to ruthlessly prioritize your actions. And fourth, and this one is absolutely key, you share your findings.
Now that third step, prioritizing, that's where the rubber meets the road. Because you can't do everything all at once, right? You don't have unlimited time or money. So decisions get based on criteria just like this. What's the most cost-effective solution? What's easiest to get done quickly? What gives us an immediate payoff? It's all about a strategic process to get the biggest bang for your buck, security-wise.
And this last step, sharing information, might just be the most important piece of the whole puzzle. This isn't something the government can do by itself, and a single company can't do it alone either. It absolutely requires a constant partnership, where industry can share what they're seeing on the ground, and intelligence agencies can provide critical advice on the threats they see coming over the horizon.
So all of this incredibly complex, non-stop work is happening every day in the background. A silent effort to reinforce the systems that we all just take for granted. It kind of makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Just how resilient is that invisible world that you rely on every single day?